Gentlemen and brethren, today I'm going to be working on my Troy-built tiller. It was built in 1973. It is very old and very Troy-built. There's the front housing. That holds the belts. That's a Harbor Freight special engine. There are the tine racks with the tines on them, and there's the rear fender. There's a better shot of the rear fender. That's what the stickers on these used to look like 50 years ago. This is a 73 model. Like I said, it's almost 50 years old. It has been a very good machine. That engine is the third engine that's been on this. And this has got 4 years on it, I think. I kind of had a long roundabout means of acquiring this machine. It was really kind of a gift from the Almighty, the way I came about it. So I kind of pretty much got this machine given to me with some caveats. Caveat one was it was in 23 boxes and a couple of buckets when I got it. The only thing that had not been completely disassembled on this was the transmission assembly. Now, there's a casting up here in the front that holds your speed selector gears and your, speed selector and your worm for the drive gears. And then there's a cast iron. There's a cast housing back here that holds your worm for your tine drive. And then there's a steel threaded tube that's been screwed in between the two of them, tightened up, aligned, and then staked with weld. Every seal on this thing just poured gear grease, and I am currently waiting on seals to come in. I had to order them. I would have thought that standard SAE sized seals would have been in stock in my local bearing supply house. But evidently I thought wrong. So I had to order it all, and I hate doing that. I'd rather do business with people that do business with me. But anyway, enough of that rant. So here's the main event, so to speak. This is the input shaft, or the input side. There's your drive wheels. That's the gear, the worm gear for it. Then you've got this spacer. Of course, there's some snap rings and washers and things that go in here, but you've got a spacer here. This looks like it was basically a piece of pipe that got cleaned out and reamed on the inside. So that spacer goes in there, and then you've got another worm, and this drives the tines. And now this fits on the shaft really nicely. There's not a whole, well, there's not any real slop in that. And then you've got another little spacer. And there's taper roller bearings front and back. So you've got a taper roller bearing that will go on here. Whoop, backward. You've got a taper roller bearing that goes on here, and it goes all the way up to this seat here, which I'm not going to push it. It's a nice, believe it or not, even as ugly as that shaft is, that shaft looks like crap. But even as bad as that is, this bearing is nice and snug on that shaft, so I'm not going to dink with that. But this back bearing is hot dog in a hallway loose. I mean, there's a 32nd, maybe even 3/64ths of gap in that bearing. It is bad. So, a smart person, let me put this up before I lose it. A smart person would just take and make a new shaft. Boom, you're done. But I'm not that guy. So, I'm going to put that up before I lose it. But what I've got in mind here is I'm just going to build up the last inch of this shaft, probably fill the, well, I won't even worry about the key slot, but I'm just going to build up the last inch of this shaft and put it in the lathe and turn it back down, and that's going to be good enough. I don't know if you can make out this worm gear very good, but this thing you know, when they set not in use, they set at an angle. So a good deal of your lubrication goes to the back of it. And it's a tiller. Nobody parks this in a $50,000 shed when they're not using it. And this thing had been laying in the weeds, I think, for a couple of years before the old man that I got it from, and then he took it apart, laid the transmission out in the rain for a couple of years. So this is very, very pitted. I will, when it finally eats the worm and the gear completely up, and I ain't got no more go-go, I will source a new one of these and a new worm gear, and at that point I will make a new shaft for this. Hopefully by that time I've got a bigger lathe. My throat in my lathe will only accommodate about 13/16 I think will go in my throat, or the headstock, go through the headstock of my lathe. So I just can't accommodate much, you know, big stuff in my toy lathe. But we are going to use a field expedient vice grip garage repair on this. So you can see about right there, there's a kind of where the carnage starts on this shaft. So I'm going to just weld her up, turn it down. Now, I don't have a rotator. I don't have fancy A-bomb 79 style stuff. So what I've got, and what you can do if you're just welding up a simple shaft on something that only turns, like this only turns like 3,600 RPM, find you a piece of something. This is just 1-inch square tubing, 125 wall. Find you a piece of something that the shaft will slide down in. Boom. Now you can roll that shaft. You've got a place to lay your hand, steady yourself, so you can roll the shaft with one hand and weld with the other, and do her pretty easy without a whole lot of drama and without a whole lot of $10,000 tools. You know, I'm not a very fancy guy, and this is not going to be a very fancy repair. No need to make things any complicated than they already are. So I'm going to cut the camera here. I'm going to set up and get this welded. Poof, we're done. Now, grounding this, I'm just going to ground it to the vise. It will ground through this, let's call it journal. It will ground through this just fine. Now, this is not a precision surface in here. You can see it's all pit stained. The spacer, that 16-inch long spacer that slipped over the top of this, it's not a snug fit. We don't have to worry about that thing at all. So I'm not worried about this surface here. If this had been a surface that I was concerned about, I'd put some grease on it. That's all you got to do. And if you're really fancy, put some dielectric grease on it, some silicone dielectric grease, and it's not going to hurt a thing. It's probably not even going to pit this at all. It's not going to try to arc stick. It's just going to weld. So, I'm going to cut the camera, and I'm going to get to work. Well, there she's built up. I'm sorry I didn't really take the time to try to show you welding that, but you guys know how to weld, and if you don't, go buy a welding machine and learn. So there you go, a poor boy weld rotator. So there she is in my spin around her, and I'm just going to turn this back down to probably stop at about 755, 760. Just so that I've got a good tight fit on the bearing. The bearing's going to be when the bearing fits good and tight, that's when I'm going to stop. So I think I'll cut her here and get my work done. Y'all get out in the shop, do the same thing. Meanwhile, y'all drive safe, watch for deer.